A single dad helped an elderly neighbor, clueless she was his kid's teacher. The thought had never crossed Mark Sullivan's mind as he balanced a casserole dish in one hand and reached to knock on the weathered door of 43 Maple Street with the other. The late October wind tugged at his jacket, whispering winter's approach through the gathering dusk, sending a shiver down his spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Behind him, fallen leaves skittered across the cracked sidewalk like tiny messengers of change. Mark adjusted his stance, feeling the weight of the day, of all his days lately, pressing down on shoulders already bent from carrying too much, for too long, alone. The door creaked open, revealing a small, frail woman with silver hair and hesitant eyes. Mrs. Eleanor Jenkins, his neighbor of 3 months, though they'd exchanged little more than brief nods until yesterday, when Mark had found her struggling with her groceries, her thin wrist bandaged and her face pinched with pain. Mr. Sullivan. Her voice carried the musical lilt of someone who had spent decades speaking to young audiences. You didn't have to. Mark, please, he corrected gently, offering the casserole with a smile that felt unfamiliar on his face. It's just chicken and rice. Nothing fancy, but it's warm. Something flickered in Eleanor's pale blue eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or the ghost of a memory, before she stepped back, opening her door wider. Then you must call me Eleanor. Please, come in from the cold. Mark hesitated, thinking of Noah, his 10-year-old son, waiting at home with homework spread across the kitchen table. The babysitter would need to leave by 8. Just for a minute, he conceded, crossing a threshold that would, though he couldn't possibly know it then, change everything. Noah Sullivan stared at the math worksheet, the numbers swimming before his eyes like minnows in a murky pond. Darting, elusive, impossible to grasp. He pressed his pencil so hard against the paper that the tip broke, snapping with a sound that mirrored his frustration. Stupid, he muttered, the word hanging in the quiet kitchen. What he wouldn't say, was how much he missed Mrs. Jenkins. How the substitute teacher, Mr. Ramirez, tried his best but couldn't explain fractions the way Mrs. Jenkins did, with stories about pizza slices and apple pies that somehow made everything click into place. How the class wasn't the same without her gentle voice and patient smile. The babysitter, Kayla, glanced up from her phone. Need help? Noah shook his head, gathering the broken pieces of his pencil. Dad will be home soon. But even as he said it, doubt crept in like a shadow. Dad was always busy lately, always tired, always saying, just a minute. Or not now, or maybe tomorrow. Ever since Mom left last year, promising to call, to visit, to remember his birthday, she hadn't done any of those things. Through the window, Noah could see his father's tall figure crossing Mrs. Jenkins' small front yard. His dad, who barely had time to help with homework, now had time for the neighbor. Noah turned back to his worksheet, trying to ignore the knot of something that felt like betrayal tightening in his chest. Eleanor's home smelled of cinnamon and old books. Mark found himself breathing deeper, drawing in the comfort of it as he set the casserole on her kitchen counter. The rooms were small but meticulously kept. Walls lined with bookshelves interrupted only by framed photographs of smiling children. Not family portraits, Mark realized, but class photos spanning decades. Yeah, Hanami, you're a teacher, he said, recognition dawning. Eleanor nodded, lowering herself carefully into a chair at the kitchen table. 42 years, 4th grade at Lincoln Elementary. She gestured to her wrist. I took a fall in my classroom 2 weeks ago. The doctor insists I take 6 weeks to recover, but I'm hoping to be back sooner. Mark's hand stilled on the casserole dish. My son Noah is in 4th grade at Lincoln. Sullivan? Eleanor repeated his name slowly, as if testing it for familiarity. Of course, Noah. Bright boy, struggles with math but has quite the imagination. Her eyes crinkled. He wrote a lovely story about a dragon who couldn't breathe fire until he learned not to be afraid of his own power. Quite the metaphor for a 10-year-old. Mark felt something crack inside him, not breaking, but opening, like a door long sealed. When was the last time he'd really talked with Noah about school? When was the last time he'd done more than check that homework was complete without actually seeing what was in it? I didn't know, he said softly. Eleanor's expression gentled. Children hold worlds inside them that we barely glimpse. She hesitated, then added, Noah doesn't talk much about home. The words landed like stones in still water, rippling through Mark's consciousness. He suddenly felt laid bare, exposed as the struggling father he was, the one who worked 60-hour weeks at the architectural firm to keep them afloat after Diana left, who cobbled together dinners from whatever was in the freezer, who fell asleep some nights in his clothes, too exhausted to change. It's been difficult, he admitted, the understatement of the year catching in his throat. Eleanor didn't press. Instead, she rose slowly from her chair, wincing slightly. Tea? Mark glanced at his watch. I should get back. The sitter, of course. No judgment in her tone, just understanding. As he turned to leave, Mark noticed a stack of graded papers on Eleanor's coffee table. Red pen marks gentle in their corrections, small stars and encouraging notes in the margins. Atop the pile lay a math worksheet with Noah's name. He's been struggling, Eleanor said quietly, following his gaze. Not just with math. He misses having your attention. The words should have stung, but instead they resonated with the hollow space that had been growing inside Mark's chest for months. I miss giving it to him, he confessed, surprised by his own honesty. Eleanor walked him to the door, her movements deliberate, careful. The casserole was very kind. Thank you. Mark nodded, suddenly awkward. If you need anything else. Perhaps, Eleanor said, her voice careful as if navigating uncertain terrain. You and Noah might join me for dinner sometime. I make a decent pot roast and I have some math strategies that might help. The invitation hung between them, unexpected and fragile as a soap bubble. Yes, Mark found himself saying, I think we'd both like that. The next morning dawned gray and drizzling, matching Noah's mood as he trudged toward the school bus, his shoulders hunched under his backpack. Mark watched from the doorway, a familiar ache spreading through his chest. Noah, he called suddenly. His son turned, face guarded in a way no child should be. Mark crossed the wet grass in his work shoes, kneeling to eye level despite the dampness seeping through his pant leg. I was thinking, how about we have dinner with Mrs. Jenkins tomorrow night? Noah's eyes widened. Mrs. Jenkins from school. Our neighbor is Mrs. Jenkins from school? The realization hit Mark anew. Of course, Noah wouldn't have made the connection. Eleanor had been absent from class since before they'd properly met as neighbors, and Noah had never seen her outside the classroom context. Yes, Mark said, watching emotions flicker across his son's face. Surprise, confusion, a cautious spark of interest. She hurt her wrist and is taking some time off. She said she has some math tricks that might help with fractions. For a moment, Noah looked torn between excitement and suspicion. But you always work late on Fridays. The simple truth in those words, the acceptance of paternal absence as routine, struck Mark like a physical blow. Not this Friday, he promised, resting a hand on Noah's shoulder and feeling the slight tension there. The unconscious bracing for disappointment. I'll leave work early. We'll pick up dessert on the way. The school bus rounded the corner, yellow against the gray morning. Really? Noah asked, the hope in his voice so fragile Mark felt his throat tighten. Really? He squeezed his son's shoulder. That's a promise. As Noah boarded the bus, his step a fraction lighter, Mark remained kneeling on the wet grass, watching until the vehicle disappeared from view. Only then did he notice the curtain falling back into place at Eleanor's front window. Had she witnessed their exchange? The thought brought not embarrassment, but a strange comfort. Standing, he brushed off his knees and headed inside to call his boss. For the first time in a long time, Mark felt the weight on his shoulders shift. Not lifting entirely, but redistributing, becoming somehow more bearable. Eleanor Jenkins had spent her life in classrooms, learning to read the unwritten stories etched in slumped shoulders and averted eyes. In 42 years of teaching, she had seen countless children carrying adult burdens, parents divorcing, family illnesses, financial hardships. She recognized the signs in Noah Sullivan the first week of school. The distraction, the forced cheerfulness, the drawings of a house with only two figures. What she hadn't expected was to recognize the same signs in his father. As she prepared for their Friday dinner, Eleanor moved carefully around her kitchen, her wrist aching despite the brace. The pot roast simmered in the slow cooker, filling the house with savory warmth. On the dining table, she had laid out three place settings, her good dishes, not used since Robert passed 5 years ago. The silence of the house pressed around her. Once it had been a comfort after days filled with the cheerful chaos of her classroom. Lately, though, the quiet felt less like peace and more like absence. The doorbell chimed at precisely 6:30. Eleanor smoothed her cardigan, suddenly nervous in a way that reminded her of first day of school jitters. Ridiculous, she told herself. These were not strangers, but a neighbor and a student. Still, something about this dinner felt significant, like turning to a new chapter in a book whose story had seemed already written. She opened the door to find Noah clutching a bakery box, his father standing behind him with a hesitant smile and a bouquet of mixed fall flowers. "Mrs. Jenkins!" Noah's voice carried the slightly too loud enthusiasm of a child feeling out an unfamiliar situation. "We brought chocolate cake, and Dad got you flowers because he said that's what you do when someone invites you for dinner. And I told him you're my teacher, but he said you're also our neighbor, so it's different, and we're grateful for the invitation." Mark finished gently, resting a steadying hand on his son's shoulder. "Thank you, Eleanor." Eleanor accepted the flowers, breathing in their subtle fragrance. "How lovely. Come in, both of you." "Noah, there's a spot in the refrigerator for the cake." As they settled into her home, Eleanor observed the subtle dance between father and son, the careful distance, the moments of awkward silence, the tentative reaching toward connection. Mark complimented her home with genuine warmth, his eyes lingering on the bookshelves. Noah moved with the contained energy of a child uncertain of his welcome, his gaze darting between the class photos on the walls. "That's from before you were my student," Eleanor explained, indicating a frame that had caught his attention. "That's last year's class." Noah studied the smiling faces. "Is that why you moved here? To be closer to our school?" "Actually, I've lived in this house for 30 years. Eleanor explained, gesturing for them to sit at the table. "Lincoln Elementary is only a 15-minute walk. I used to make the journey every day, watching the seasons change along the way." "We didn't know you were our neighbor," Noah said, his tone somewhere between accusation and wonder. "Well," Eleanor smiled, "now we know, don't we? And neighbors help each other." Over dinner, conversation flowed more easily than any of them might have expected. Noah gradually relaxed, his natural curiosity emerging as he peppered Eleanor with questions about school and her teaching career. Mark spoke of his work designing sustainable housing, his voice gaining animation when describing a current project for affordable family apartments. "You seem to care deeply about creating homes," Eleanor observed, passing the breadbasket. A shadow crossed Mark's face. "Homes matter. A house is just structure, but a home..." He trailed off, glancing at Noah, who had suddenly become very interested in his mashed potatoes. Eleanor nodded, understanding the unspoken. "Indeed." After dinner, while Mark insisted on clearing the dishes despite her protests, Eleanor spread Noah's math worksheets on the coffee table. "Shall we tackle these fractions?" Noah's enthusiasm dimmed visibly. "I'm no good at math." "Nonsense," Eleanor said firmly, patting the couch beside her. "You're simply a different kind of learner. Some minds grab onto numbers naturally, others need to see them in action." From her teaching bag, she withdrew a set of colorful fraction tiles and a small bundle of popsicle sticks. "Let's try something." Mark worked quietly in the kitchen, occasionally glancing at the pair on the couch, his son's furrowed brow gradually relaxing as Eleanor patiently built physical models of the math problems, relating each concept to real-world examples. When Noah successfully worked through a particularly challenging problem, his face lit with pride, and he turned instinctively toward the kitchen. "Dad, look, I figured it out." Mark set down the dish towel immediately and came to examine Noah's work. "That's fantastic, buddy," carrying genuine pride that made Noah sit straighter. Eleanor watched the exchange, feeling something warm unfurl in her chest. This was why she had become a teacher, not just to impart knowledge, but to witness these moments of connection, of growth. As the evening drew to a close, Noah helped pack up the math materials, his confidence visibly bolstered. "Can we do this again sometime?" he asked, the question directed at both adults. Eleanor met Mark's eyes over Noah's head, reading in them the same mixture of hope and uncertainty she felt herself. "I think that would be lovely," she said softly. On their doorstep, as father and son prepared to leave, Mark hesitated. "Eleanor, would you like to join us for pizza and a movie tomorrow night? It's our Saturday tradition, though we've been inconsistent lately." The invitation carried weight beyond its simple words, an offering of reciprocity, of something potentially ongoing. "I'd be honored," Eleanor replied, feeling a pleasant warmth that had nothing to do with the cozy house at her back. As she watched them walk across the lawn to their home, Noah's hand tentatively seeking his father's, Eleanor realized she had stopped thinking of the silence that awaited her inside as emptiness. Instead, for the first time in years, it felt like a pause, a breath between sentences in an ongoing conversation. November unfolded in a rhythm of small kindnesses. Mark fixed Eleanor's leaking kitchen faucet. Eleanor helped Noah with a science project. Weekend dinners became a regular occurrence, alternating between their homes. For Mark, these gatherings were a lifeline he hadn't known he needed. Eleanor's presence brought a steadying influence to their fractured household, not replacing what was missing, but creating something new, something that eased the constant ache of trying to be both parents at once. "You've done a remarkable job with him," Eleanor told Mark one evening as they sat on her porch, watching Noah rake leaves in her front yard, his cheeks flushed with exertion and pleasure in the simple task. Mark's laugh held more bitterness than humor. "I'm barely keeping us afloat." "That's not what I see." Eleanor's voice was gentle but firm. "I see a boy who is kind, thoughtful, and resilient despite significant loss. Children become who they are largely through what they witness, Mark. He's becoming a good man because he's watching one." Mark stared into his mug of hot cider, unable to meet her gaze. His mother left 14 months ago, said she needed to find herself. Apparently that meant finding herself in Florida with a yoga instructor. The words spilled out before he could contain them. Noah waited by the window every Sunday for the first 6 months. She promised she'd visit. She never did. Eleanor's hand settled lightly on his forearm, warm and steady. "I know." "Huh? How could you?" Noah wrote about it. Not directly, but in stories about a boy whose mother turned into a bird and flew away. In pictures of houses where the mother figure was a ghost, present but transparent. Eleanor's eyes held compassion without pity. Children express their truths in the ways they can manage. "I've been doing this long enough to read between the lines." Mark set down his mug, pressing the heels of his hands against his eyes. "I don't know how to help him. I can't even talk about it properly myself." "Perhaps," Eleanor suggested softly, "you could start by acknowledging that you're both hurting. Not to fix it, just to name it." Across the yard, Noah had gathered a pile of leaves and now stood regarding his work with satisfaction. As they watched, he took 3 running steps and leaped into the center of the pile, disappearing in a burst of red and gold. The sound of his laughter, unguarded, purely joyful, drifted across the cooling evening air. "When was the last time you heard that?" Eleanor asked. Mark didn't need to answer. They both knew. Thanksgiving arrived with a crystalline cold that turned breath to vapor and frosted window panes into delicate art. Noah woke early, the excitement of a day off school and the promised feast at Eleanor's propelling him from bed, while the sky was still more gray than blue. In the kitchen, he found his father already up, methodically peeling potatoes at the sink. "Can I help?" Noah asked, pulling a chair to stand beside him. Mark glanced down, surprised. "Sure, buddy. Want to rinse these as I peel them?" They worked in companionable silence for a few minutes. The only sounds the scrape of the peeler and the splash of water. "Dad?" Noah's voice was hesitant. "Do you think Mom knows it's Thanksgiving?" Mark's hands stilled. In the 6 weeks since his conversation with Eleanor on the porch, he had been trying, awkwardly, imperfectly, to create space for these questions. Each one still felt like a small grenade, threatening to detonate his carefully maintained composure. "I think she does," he said carefully, setting down the peeler and turning to face his son. "But I don't know if she's thinking about us today or not." Noah nodded, processing this. "I used to think she left because I did something wrong." The simple statement, delivered with a child's directness, broke something open in Mark's chest. He knelt down, potato forgotten in his hand, to meet Noah's eyes directly. "Noah, listen to me. Your mother leaving had nothing, absolutely nothing to do with you. Adults sometimes make decisions based on their own needs and struggles, and those decisions hurt the people they love. But that doesn't mean those people did anything to deserve being hurt." Noah's eyes, so like his mother's, searched Mark's face. "Do you miss her?" Mark had prepared himself for many questions, but not this one. The honest answer was complex. He missed who she had been before unhappiness had hollowed her out, missed the family they had once been, but the sharp pain of abandonment had gradually dulled to a background ache. "I miss parts of our life when she was here," he said finally. "But mostly I worry about you missing her." Noah considered this, his young face solemn with a child's attempt at adult understanding. "I do miss her, but I'm not sad all the time anymore." He glanced toward the window, where Eleanor's house was visible across their small yards. "And I like having Mrs. Jenkins around. She makes you smile more." Before Mark could formulate a response to this observation, Noah switched tracks with the mercurial attention shift of childhood. "Can we make sweet potato casserole with the little marshmallows on top?" Mark laughed, grateful for the reprieve. "Let's finish these regular potatoes first, then we'll see about the sweet ones." By the time they crossed to Eleanor's house that afternoon, arms laden with dishes, the sky had cleared to a brilliant blue. Eleanor answered the door wearing an apron over a burgundy dress, her silver hair arranged more carefully than usual. "Happy Thanksgiving," she greeted them, the warmth in her voice enveloping them even before they stepped into the cinnamon-scented warmth of her home. The table was set with an embroidered cloth, taper candles, and what was clearly her best china. A small turkey, perfect for 3, she explained, roasted in the oven, filling the house with savory aromas. "This is lovely," Mark said, taking in the effort she had made. "Thank you for including us." Eleanor's smile held a hint of something vulnerable. "It's been a while since I've had reason to use the good dishes. Robert and I used to host the whole family, his brothers, their children. After he passed, the gatherings moved elsewhere. I didn't mind really, but I've missed the preparation, the anticipation." Noah, who had been exploring the living room, called out suddenly, "Mrs. Jenkins, is this your husband?" He stood before a photograph Mark hadn't noticed before, perhaps newly placed on the mantel, of a tall man with kind eyes and Eleanor, much younger but instantly recognizable, laughing up at him. "Yes," Eleanor said, crossing to stand beside Noah. "That's Robert. He was a high school science teacher. We met at a district educators conference 37 years ago." "Was he nice?" Noah asked with a child's directness. "Very nice," Eleanor confirmed, touching the frame gently. "He grew roses and made terrible puns and always carried handkerchiefs because I'm allergic to cats but could never resist petting them." "Do you miss him?" Noah's question echoed the one he had asked his father that morning. Mark started to intervene. "Noah, that's personal." But Eleanor shook her head slightly. "Every day," she said simply. "But missing someone is really just another way of carrying them with you. The people we love become part of who we are." She rested her hand lightly on Noah's shoulder. "Would you like to help me set out the cranberry sauce? It needs to be transferred to a proper dish." As Noah followed her to the kitchen, Mark remained by the photograph, studying the face of the man Eleanor had loved. Had he known when this picture was taken how limited their time would be? Did anyone ever really know? The meal itself was everything a Thanksgiving feast should be. Abundant, flavorful, punctuated by comfortable conversation and occasional laughter. Noah regaled them with stories from school. Mark described the community garden his firm was designing for a formerly vacant lot. Eleanor shared anecdotes from her decades of teaching that had them both laughing until their sides ached. When the plates were cleared and they had moved to the living room with slices of pumpkin pie, a comfortable fullness settled over them, not just from the food, but from something less tangible. "I'm thankful for fractions," Noah announced suddenly, breaking a contemplative silence. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Are you indeed?" Noah nodded earnestly. "Because if you hadn't taught me about them, maybe Dad wouldn't have met you as our neighbor, and then we wouldn't be having Thanksgiving together, and Dad wouldn't laugh as much." The utterly childlike logic, drawing direct lines between mathematics and happiness, brought smiles to both adults' faces, even as Mark felt a flush creep up his neck at the casual observation of his improved mood. "Well, I'm thankful for neighbors who bring casseroles when one has a sprained wrist," Eleanor countered, raising her teacup in a small toast. Mark, feeling the warmth of belonging settle around him like a familiar blanket, added quietly, "And I'm thankful for second chances." Later, as they gathered their empty dishes and prepared to head home in the early evening darkness, Noah whispered something to Eleanor that made her eyes widen briefly before she nodded and disappeared into another room. She returned with a small paper bag. "Noah thought you might like to have these," she explained, handing it to Mark. Inside were 6 handkerchiefs neatly pressed and folded. "They were Robert's," Eleanor said softly. "Noah noticed I don't use them and thought, well, that someone should." The simple gift, personal, weighted with memory, touched Mark in a way he couldn't immediately articulate. He looked from Eleanor to his son, seeing between them a conspiracy of kindness. "Thank you," he managed finally. "Both of you." Walking home through the crisp night, Noah's hand warm in his, Mark found himself thinking about the photograph on Eleanor's mantel. About love that transforms but doesn't end with absence. About grief that softens but never completely disappears. About the unexpected ways people continue to care for each other long after direct connection has been severed. Perhaps that was what he had been missing in the aftermath of Diana's departure. Not just help with logistics, but this sense of continuation, of life folding back on itself in patterns that created something new from what had been lost. December transformed their neighborhood with lights and wreaths, every house participating in the annual display except for Mark's, which remained unadorned in the growing festivity. "We should put up some lights," Noah suggested on the first Saturday of the month. his breath fogging in the cold air as they returned from the grocery store. Mark hesitated, remembering the boxes of decorations in the attic, untouched since Diana left. The thought of opening them, of facing the memories attached to each ornament and tradition, made his chest tighten. Maybe next weekend, he deflected, knowing even as he said it that he was stalling. Noah's face fell, but he didn't argue. Instead, he cast a wistful glance at Eleanor's house, where a simple wreath adorned the door and electric candles glowed in each window. That evening, as Noah worked on homework, Mark found himself on Eleanor's doorstep, a troubled question taking shape in his mind. Anna, how did you do it? He asked when they were settled in her living room with tea. The first Christmas without Robert, how did you face it? Eleanor considered the question, her expression thoughtful. Poorly at first, she admitted. I nearly canceled it altogether, but my sister insisted I come stay with her family, and being surrounded by their traditions, different from ours but still full of meaning, helped me see that I could honor what Robert and I had built while creating something new. She set down her teacup. Noah wants to decorate? Mark nodded, embarrassed by his reluctance. Diana loved Christmas. She started planning in September, had traditions for everything, specific ornaments for specific branches, hot chocolate recipes for different weather conditions, Christmas pajamas ordered by Halloween. He trailed off, the memories unexpectedly vivid. It feels wrong to do it without her, but worse not to do it at all. Then perhaps, Eleanor suggested gently, the solution is not to replicate what was, but to create something that acknowledges both the past and the present. The following weekend, with Eleanor's help, Mark and Noah transformed their living room not with the elaborate decorations of previous years, but with simple strands of lights, paper snowflakes cut by Noah's increasingly confident hands, and a small tree adorned with ornaments they selected together from the attic stores, choosing some familiar favorites while deliberately leaving others packed away. Is this okay? Mark asked Noah as they stepped back to admire their work. It's different from how Mom did it. Noah studied the tree, his expression serious beyond his years. It's our Christmas now, he said finally. I think it's supposed to be different. Out of the mouths of babes, Mark thought, feeling something tight in his chest loosen just a fraction. As Christmas approached, their interconnected routines deepened. 3 nights a week, Eleanor joined them for dinner. On Wednesdays, she helped Noah with particularly challenging homework while Mark worked late. Weekends often found them all together, sometimes joined by colleagues of Eleanor's, or occasionally Mark's friend David from the architectural firm. What began as mutual aid, Mark helping with household repairs, Eleanor providing after-school supervision, evolved into something more fundamental, a chosen family, building new traditions day by day. The transformation was most visible in Noah, who moved through December with growing confidence. His grades improved, he joined the school chess club, he laughed more easily. The haunted look that had shadowed his eyes since Diana's departure gradually faded, replaced by the resilient optimism of childhood restored. For Mark, the change was more complex but no less profound. The crushing weight of solo parenting, of being everything to everyone while having no one for himself, eased with Eleanor's steady presence. He found himself sleeping better, worrying less, occasionally even writing in his journal again, a practice abandoned in the chaos of the past year. And Eleanor, who had built her life around nurturing others only to find herself alone in retirement, discovered that her capacity for care remained undiminished. Teaching Noah brought familiar satisfaction. Supporting Mark through his halting steps toward healing gave her days renewed purpose. None of them discussed these changes directly. They simply unfolded day by day in small moments of connection. Mark remembering how Eleanor took her tea, Eleanor stocking Noah's favorite cereal for his after-school snacks, Noah drawing pictures of all 3 of them to hang on both refrigerators. But change, even positive change, rarely proceeds without complication. 2 days before Christmas, as they finished decorating sugar cookies in Eleanor's kitchen, the phone rang. Eleanor answered, her expression shifting from pleasant anticipation to dismay as the conversation continued. When she hung up, both Mark and Noah were watching her expectantly. That was my niece Jessica, Eleanor explained, her voice carefully neutral. There's been a change of plans. They've decided to spend Christmas here instead of at their cabin in Vermont. They'll arrive tomorrow. That's wonderful, Mark said automatically, even as he registered the flicker of uncertainty in Eleanor's eyes. How many are coming? Jessica and her husband, their 3 children, and my sister Margaret. Eleanor's fingers twisted together. It will be lovely to see them all. Noah, sensing the adult's discomfort, but not its cause, asked the critical question, "Does this mean we won't have Christmas Eve dinner together?" The plan had been simple. Christmas Eve at Eleanor's, with Mark cooking his grandmother's lasagna recipe. Christmas morning at Mark and Noah's, with presents and Eleanor's famous cinnamon rolls. Eleanor faltered, clearly torn. "Of course you should be with your family," Mark said quickly, pushing down his own disappointment. "We understand completely. You are also my family," Eleanor said quietly, the simple declaration hanging in the air between them. Noah looked between the adults, a frown creasing his forehead. Before either could respond, he offered his own solution. "Why can't we all have Christmas together? There's lots of room." The childlike practicality broke the tension, drawing reluctant smiles from both adults. "It's not quite that simple, Noah," Mark began. "Why not?" Noah persisted. "Mrs. Jenkins is our family now, too." "You said so, Dad. You told Uncle David on the phone that we had found a new kind of family." Mark flushed, caught in his own words. "I did say that," he acknowledged, meeting Eleanor's gaze. "And I meant it. But Eleanor's actual family is coming." "Perhaps," Eleanor interrupted gently. "Noah has the right idea. Not for the whole day, but would you both join us for Christmas Eve dinner? I'd like my sister and niece to meet you." The invitation, tentative but sincere, settled something in Mark's chest that had been fluttering anxiously. "We'd be honored." Christmas Eve arrived with a light dusting of snow that turned the neighborhood into a scene from a holiday card. Mark and Noah approached Eleanor's house that evening to find it transformed. Lights glowing from every window, the sound of voices and laughter spilling onto the porch. Noah clutched the gift he had made for Eleanor, a framed drawing of the three of them building a snowman, meticulously colored and signed with his newly perfected cursive signature. Mark carried the lasagna, still warm from the oven, in a bottle of wine. "Ready?" Mark asked, suddenly nervous in a way he couldn't quite define. Noah nodded firmly. "Ready?" Eleanor answered the door wearing a deep green dress Mark hadn't seen before, her face alight with pleasure. "You're here. Come in, come in. Everyone's eager to meet you." The living room, usually so orderly, hummed with the controlled chaos of family gathering. Three children, ranging from about 5 to 13, were engaged in an elaborate game involving cushions and what appeared to be a Christmas-themed scavenger hunt. A tall woman who bore a striking resemblance to Eleanor stood by the fireplace, deep in conversation with a younger couple. "Margaret," Eleanor called, beckoning her sister. "This is Mark Sullivan and his son Noah, our neighbors I was telling you about." Margaret's handshake was firm, her assessing gaze reminding Mark of Eleanor's classroom scrutiny. "So you're the architect who's been keeping my sister company. She speaks very highly of you both." Before Mark could respond, the youngest child looked up from her game and announced with the brutal honesty of kindergartners everywhere, "Aunt Eleanor, is he your boyfriend?" The room fell momentarily silent. Mark felt heat rush to his face, while Eleanor gave a startled laugh. "Lily, that's not..." Jessica began, mortified. "No, dear," Eleanor answered calmly. "Mark is my friend, an important one, but not a romantic one." The simple clarity of her response, neither flustered nor overly defensive, eased the momentary awkwardness. The child, satisfied, returned to her game, and conversation resumed. Yet as the evening progressed, Mark found himself returning to the child's innocent question and Eleanor's response. Friends seemed simultaneously too small and too vast a word for what Eleanor had become in their lives. In the span of just 3 months, she had helped rebuild the foundation of their home, not through grand gestures, but through daily acts of steadfast presence. Across the dining table, now extended to accommodate their expanded circle, Mark watched Eleanor with her family. The easy affection, the shared references to past holidays, the gentle teasing. She was different with them, he realized. More relaxed, less careful with her words. They knew her in ways he and Noah were just beginning to discover. Yet when Eleanor caught his eye during a burst of laughter, her smile held a particular warmth that seemed reserved for him alone. A silent acknowledgement passed between them. "This is good. This matters." After dinner, as the children persuaded their parents to open one gift each, "It's a family tradition," they insisted. Noah approached Eleanor with his carefully wrapped present. "This is for you," he said, suddenly shy. "Dad helped with the frame, but I did the drawing myself." Eleanor unwrapped it with deliberate care, her expression softening as she took in the colorful scene. 3 figures, clearly Noah, Mark, and herself, stood beside a lopsided snowman, their stick arms reaching toward each other, connecting them in a triangle of belonging. "Oh, Noah," she breathed, blinking rapidly. "It's beautiful." "Ça for no, thank you." Noah beamed, then added earnestly, "You can put it next to the picture of your husband. Dad says people we love stay with us even when they're gone. And I thought maybe we could stay with you too. In pictures, I mean. So you're never really alone." The room quieted again, but differently this time. A hush of recognition rather than awkwardness. Margaret's eyes met Mark's across the room, something approving in her gaze. Eleanor gathered Noah into a gentle hug. "That's exactly where it belongs," she assured him, her voice steady despite the emotion evident in her eyes. "And you're right, love stays in all its forms." Later, as they prepared to leave, Noah's arms laden with unexpected gifts from Eleanor's family, who had thoughtfully brought extras, just in case, Margaret pulled Mark aside. "My sister has been different in her emails these past months," she said without preamble. Lighter, more present. After Robert died, part of her seemed to go with him. I wasn't sure she'd ever fully engage with life again. Her gaze was direct, unflinching. "Thank you for that, for helping her find her way back." Mark shook his head, humbled by the misattribution. "It's been entirely mutual. Eleanor saved us as much as we might have helped her." Margaret's smile suggested this was exactly the right answer. That's how real family works. On the doorstep, Eleanor pressed a small package into Mark's hands. "For tomorrow morning," she instructed, "and I'll be over by 9 with the cinnamon rolls." "Are you sure?" Mark asked. "Your family is perfectly capable of entertaining themselves for a few hours," Eleanor finished firmly. "Some traditions, even new ones, should be honored." Christmas morning dawned clear and brilliant, sunlight refracting through ice-laden branches to cast prismatic patterns across the living room floor. Noah woke at an hour Mark had forgotten existed, his excitement palpable as they moved through their new rituals, lighting the tree, making hot chocolate, FaceTiming with Mark's parents in Arizona. The small pile of presents under their tree, modest compared to previous years' extravagances, somehow seemed more meaningful for their restraint. Each gift had been chosen with particular care. Art supplies for Noah's growing interest in drawing, a set of professional drafting tools Mark had mentioned admiring, books selected for specific interest rather than to impress. When they reached Eleanor's gift, Mark carefully removed the simple wrapping to reveal a small wooden box, clearly old and well-loved. Inside, nestled in faded velvet, lay a pocket watch, its silver case engraved with intricate vines. A note in Eleanor's precise handwriting explained, "This belonged to Robert's father and to his father before him. Robert had no sons to pass it to, and our nephews have their own family heirlooms. It deserves to be where it will be valued, with someone who understands that time is our most precious resource, and how we spend it our most important choice. Merry Christmas, dear friend." Mark ran his thumb over the cool silver surface, feeling the weight of the gift, not just the object itself, but the history it carried, the trust its transference represented. "It's like a grandpa watch," Noah observed, peering at it with interest. "Yes," Mark agreed softly. "That's exactly what it is." When Eleanor arrived at 9, bearing her promised cinnamon rolls and a small additional gift for Noah, a chess set that had belonged to her husband, they welcomed her into their Christmas morning as if she had always been part of it. The absence of Diana still existed, an empty space they moved around by unspoken agreement, but it no longer defined the day. What defined it instead was the new constellation they had formed. 3 people who had found each other in their separate sorrows and, through small daily kindnesses, built something unexpected and precious. As they sat together in the gentle chaos of torn wrapping paper and half-eaten cinnamon rolls, Noah suddenly asked, "Dad, when school starts again, will Mrs. Jenkins still be our neighbor? Or will she just be my teacher again?" The question carried a child's fear of loss, of returning to the way things had been before this bridge between classroom and home had been discovered. Mark looked to Eleanor, letting her answer. "Noah," she said with gentle certainty, "I will always be your neighbor. And your teacher, yes, but some of the most important lessons happen outside the classroom." She glanced at Mark, her eyes warm with unspoken understanding. "We're connected now in ways that school schedules can't change." Noah considered this, then nodded, satisfied. "Good, because Dad smiles more since you moved in. And I think you smile more too." Out of the mouths of babes, Mark thought again, meeting Eleanor's gaze over their son's head. Their son, not biologically, not legally, but in the ways that had come to matter most. In care freely given, in attention, lovingly paid, in presence, reliably offered. Yes, Eleanor agreed simply. I believe we all do. Outside, the winter sun continued its slow arc across the sky, casting their three shadows on the wall behind them, separate but overlapping, distinct but connected. Like the family they had become, not by blood or by plan, but by the quiet miracle of choosing each other, day after day after day. A single dad had helped an elderly neighbor. Clueless, she was his kid's teacher. And in that simple act of kindness, three lives had been transformed, not dramatically or suddenly, but gradually and completely, in the way that only love can accomplish.